Hello, you all. My name is Beatriz Erazo, and I want to say thank you to Foro de Estudios en Lenguas Internacional in the year 17th version for giving me the opportunity to share something with you online. Um, as I mentioned, my name is Beatriz Erazo, and I work for Mayor de San Andrés University as a professor of applied linguistics, and I teach English at Bolivian Catholic University as well. I am the academic director of English Tech Bolivia, and I am part of TESOL International. Currently, I am serving as chair-elect for the English as a Foreign Language interest section. In this presentation, I would like to share a little bit of my experience regarding teaching and learning vocabulary, something that is quite necessary, but using the techniques of storytelling and peer correction. So this is the agenda for the day. We are going to begin thinking of questions that you would like to have answered during this presentation, and then I'm going to share with you some objectives, various techniques regarding storytelling and peer observation, peer assessment, and then I will present to you the theoretical background. I hope we are going to have time to reflect on the practice, and hopefully we are going to talk about the answers that you may have for the questions that you could write at the beginning of the presentation. So what I would like you to do right now is to please get a piece of paper, a notebook or something, and think of this presentation, teaching and learning vocabulary through storytelling and peer assessment. And what would you like to get from these presentations? What expectations do you have? There must be a reason why you are here. So I would like you to write down your questions. Please, I'm going to give you just some seconds to do it. So go ahead. Yes, just take notes of all the questions that you think you may have regarding this presentation, please. I hope that will be enough, so let's continue. What is the main objective? To talk about vocabulary, to teach vocabulary, and we all know that we need words to communicate. Our students are learning English because they want to communicate in this second, third, even fourth language they are learning. So we need to think of the way we have learned these words, this vocabulary, and try to come up with different ideas on how to teach vocabulary to our students. So from my personal perspective, I remember that when I was learning the language, I was given lists of words that I was supposed to memorize the meaning, and then maybe we had some tests about them. Probably that was not the best approach to learn. We need to provide a certain context so the students are going to learn the meaning of those words and how to use them in that context. And the best way to do it is storytelling. We all like stories. We like to listen to stories and we like to tell stories. They could be stories that we heard from somebody. They could be personal stories, some anecdote. They could be stories that we just make up. The stories give the context that we need to learn words. So among the specific objectives that you are going to find in this presentation, the first one is to demonstrate how to use storytelling to teach vocabulary. And we are going to work on 3 specific examples: adjectives and antonyms, phrasal verbs, and idiomatical phrases regarding human body parts. As you can see, the first one could be applied for beginners, phrasal verb for intermediate students, and idiomatical phrases for more advanced students such as yourselves. And also we need to understand what is the meaning or what is the definition of a storytelling and peer correction or peer assessment in this specific context of learning words, learning vocabulary using these two strategies. So let's go directly to the first activity of this presentation. So what do you see in the three pictures that you have here? Yes, you can see adjectives. For example, in the first picture, we have a tall man and a short man. And then on the second picture, you can see that there is a difficult math problem versus an easy math problem. And here we can see a beautiful clean cat versus a poor dirty cat. So you want your students to learn adjectives that describe things or people or animals, and you are going to provide them with certain context to do that. So you are going to tell your students that they have to come up with a story that is going to explain the meaning of the adjective and the antonym. The story has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you want to give them some grammar practice, you can tell them that they can present their stories all in simple present, or they can begin in the past and then continue in the present. Please, let me give you an example. This is my friend Charles. He loved having long hair. He had long, long hair. But then he got a job interview and he decided to go to the barber shop and had his hair cut. Now his hair is short and he looks much better. So here you could see that I used long hair, short hair. Now, if you were my classmates, I would like to ask you, did I use the adjective and its antonym appropriately? So if you think I did so, you are going to tell me, oh yes, you have a green face. But if you think I didn't do so, you are going to tell me I got a yellow face and explain why and why not. And if you think I didn't do a good job, probably you are going to give me suggestions, and then I'm going to try to fix my errors using your suggestions. This is the traffic light technique because we use the colors of the traffic light, red, yellow, and green. And as you can see, it's not that difficult to use. Let's listen to another example. So this was me, beautiful Beatrizita. During the pandemic, I didn't do much exercise and I loved eating these picana hamburgers that are fashionable nowadays in my country. So I was quite heavy. I went to the doctor. The doctor told me that I couldn't continue this way. So I had to start a diet and do some exercises. And now I'm so happy that I am thin. So I was heavy and now I am thin. It is the time that you tell me first, did I use the antonym and its the adjective and its antonym appropriately? Give me a face. And did my story begin in the past and end in the present? Now this is something different that you are including, right? Let's have another example. This is a caterpillar. He felt ugly because nobody wanted him. One day, after eating a lot, he turned out into a cocoon. And after a while, the cocoon opened up, and now it's a beautiful butterfly. Typical story, right? So please now give me some assessment. First, did I use the adjective and antonym appropriately? Give me a face. And then also tell me, did I begin in the past and finished my story in the present? Did my story have a structure, a beginning, a middle, and an ending? When you teach your students to give feedback, it is very important that you be very specific and focused on the things that you want them to pay attention to. It could be just one thing, or it could be three things, like these ones, focus on the vocabulary, on grammar, and the structure of the story. Or they could be to pronunciation, using complete sentences, fluency, or any other aspect that you would like them to pay attention to. Now, you tell your students that they are going to be working on this before they do the activity. So while they are working on it, they are not going to be only learning the vocabulary, but they are going to be practicing other features as well, such as pronunciation or fluency or accuracy, for example. And they are going to be focusing on that, but also they are going to get practice at the moment of listening, having to listen to other classmates. So they are going to say, okay, I was practicing fluency, this is fluency, and then based on that experience, I can tell my classmate if he's going to get a green face, a yellow face, or a red face. So it's kind of basic. What do you think? And again, the important thing here is to be focused on specific features. Tell your students what they are going to be paying attention to so they can work on that. And at the end, they are going to use that experience to tell their classmates how well they did. Now let's go to the second activity, which is going to be focused on phrasal verbs. In this case, you have to arrange your students to work in groups of 3. Either if it's face-to-face or online, you can send them to breakout rooms if you are using Zoom, and in groups of 3, because they are going to have, they have to prepare a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And one student is going to focus on the beginning, another is going to focus on the middle, and the last one is going to focus on the end of the story. You provide the phrasal verbs that they have to learn. For example, in this case, phrasal verbs with the verb look, and they can choose any of the phrasal verbs they want. You can work with them like using a picture like this one, and you can ask them to match the meanings, to study the meanings, to come up with the meanings. But to reinforce that understanding after your short explanation, they have to prepare a story. So in their groups of 3, you are going to tell them that the focus here is going to be humor. So the students choose the phrasal verbs that they want to work with, any phrasal verb, right? And they have to choose 3 per group, and they are going to decide who is going to work with which phrasal verb. Then they have to come up with a topic, a plot for a funny or ridiculous story, something that has to make everybody laugh. They can use personal experience or maybe something they watched on TV or read in a book, whatever they want to. Then one of the students has to begin the story using his or her phrasal verb. Then the student that is in charge of the middle of the story has to continue using his or her phrasal verb, and the third student is going to finish the story. Once they come up with the plot and all the ideas, the next thing that they have to do is to rehearse, right? They have to rehearse who's going to do first, second, and third. And they have to get ready, because then you are going to ask them to go in front of the class, and then they are going to present their story. Or if you are doing this online, they will have to start their videos and tell the story, taking the appropriate turns. You visit the different groups and provide any help that they need. And the most important thing is that they have to use the phrasal verbs, giving them the correct meaning. So then comes the moment of peer assessment. And you are going to tell them, okay, we are going to give prizes. When I'm teaching face-to-face, I usually bring candies or chocolates. You can give badges or applauses or maybe some extra points to your students, depending on how the class assess them. So you can say the prize for the funniest story goes to group 1, group 2, group 3. The most important here is not just saying why, not saying just who got the funniest story, but they have to explain why they think it was really funny. And funniest, among all the others. So they have to elaborate and they have to support and back up their answers. And then you can also say, okay, now we have the second prize for the group that used the phrasal verbs in the most correct way, giving it the appropriate meaning. Or for those that presented it very well, maybe some movement, body language, acting, using, faces, different phrases or emotion, or maybe who made the fastest presentation, the less mistakes, the easiest to understand. It's up to you. You can decide. You can even discuss these different categories with your students before they prepare their stories, so they have an idea what they can focus on. That you can do it at the end, some brainstorming ideas, and then prepare the stories. The most important thing here is that students have to understand that we need this context of the story. It has to be funny but logical, and they have to use the phrasal verbs correctly. And then you are going to decide on the features that you want them to pay attention to. Easy, right? Now let's go to activity 3. For this activity, I would like you to be a little bit more participative. So just try to follow my instructions here. So I am going to show you some pictures. I'm going to give you some seconds for you to give a look at them, and you are going to describe them objectively. So if you do this in classes, you have to clarify that when we say this is an objective activity, they cannot give their personal opinions. So they have to be objective. So you are going to imagine that I am one student giving an objective description of the picture. I may say, I see a man, he's got brown hair, he's wearing a green t-shirt and beige pants, and he has one foot inside of a vase, and based on his face, it is not easy for him. Or you can see, I see two men, two young boys. They are facing each other there. They are one in front of the other, and they are looking at their eyes in a very direct way. And I see something weird. That's not objective. I see a man that he's holding two hands on his own hands. And here there is a man that is feeling lots of cold. He's wearing a wool hat, a sweater, and mittens, and there is snow on one of his shoulders. So try to motivate your students, not giving their personal opinions, right? Not like maybe he is living in Alaska or something like that, just to give an objective description of the pictures that they see. And after the descriptions, you are going to ask them to match the phrases that you have there to the pictures that you presented before. So maybe you can remember now what pictures they were and try to match them with these phrases. They never seem to see eye to eye. Carlos is giving me the cold shoulder. As always, he put the food in it. I need a pair of hands to finish this job. So after they do this matching, then you can go and tell them, oh, these are idiomatical phrases. Idiomatical phrases regarding the human body. You see? See eye to eye, giving me the cold shoulder, put the food in it, a pair of hands. So now the students know what is the vocabulary that you want them to learn. Then you tell them, match the idiomatical phrase to their corresponding meaning. So you give them some time. I'm going to give you like some seconds for you to do that. So when we say a pair of hands, the definition would be a person who can do or is doing a job. And then when I say to not share the same views as somebody about something, that is not to see eye to eye. And then to say or do something that upsets, offends, or embarrasses somebody, to put the foot in it, and finally, to treat somebody in unfriendly ways, to give somebody the cold shoulder. So now students were focusing first on the literal meaning, the picture to the phrase that was the literal meaning of this idiomatical phrase, and now they are dealing with the connotative meaning, what it really means. You can also tell them that we have similar idiomatical expressions in our own language. In my case, it's Spanish. So I can make some comparisons like, oh, how do you say to put the foot in it? In my country would say meter la pata, right? So you can do similar things with them so they can understand that this is not just something that happens in English, but it's a cultural thing that happens in all the languages. So how can your students use these idiomatical phrases to come up with stories? This time you are going to ask them to think of an anecdote. Yes? So an anecdote is something personal that happens to the person. And students are going to choose the idiomatical phrases. And students can choose the same idiomatical phrase if they want to. Of course, you're going to provide more than 4, so they are going to have more diversity at that moment. So that is not really important. The important thing is that they can find something to relate to. So the anecdote can be a personal anecdote or could be an anecdote of a family member, a friend, or somebody. The important point here is that they have to use the idiomatical phrase in a way that anyone that listens to that story is going to understand the meaning of that idiomatical phrase. So they can prepare their story, take some notes, get a beginning, get a middle, and an ending of their anecdote. And then in groups, after they have worked individually on their stories, they are going to go to groups and they are going to rehearse telling their anecdotes. And you are going to ask your students that at the moment of sharing their stories with their groups, they have to focus on the meaning of the story and also the story itself, how the classmate tells or shares his or her story with the group. After the sharing, you are going to invite the whole class to work on some reflection. You can prepare specific questions for them to reflect on the experience. For example, did the classmate use the idiomatical phrase appropriately? And remember, so they can work in groups of 4 and you can ask them to think about it, or you can have like a plenary and ask different students so they can give specific examples. Yes, I was with Carlitos, and Carlitos used this idiomatical phrase, and yes, I think he used it very well. So remember that at this point, these are advanced students and they are able to support their answers in a more fluent and specific way. You can also tell them to ask about their feelings, right? Their feelings while they were telling their anecdote or their feelings while they were listening to a classmate's anecdote. Maybe something resonated with them. It's important to talk about how they felt during the experience. And they can also say what they liked about it, and why they dislike about it, and of course support their answers. And you can ask them, okay, you were listening to your classmate, did you ask any follow-up questions? Did you make sure that you understood what your classmate was talking about? Did you show interest? So you can also teach them some active listening skills and strategies in the activity. And at the end of it, maybe your classmate didn't work very well, or maybe you didn't understand the meaning very well. Maybe you offered some tips. So these are the questions that you are going to present to your students before they share. And then when they come back, they are going to report. It's important that they always know what they have to reflect on. And remember, for reflections to be like valuable, they have to be supported, backed up. I like working on these kind of activities because they follow the Kolb's experiential learning cycle. Students work on the activity, and then while they are giving this peer assessment, they have to reflect on what happened. They have to think of what they did. And then after sharing, you can help have them like a certain conceptualization. They can really confirm their own understanding of the meaning of the words that they are learning. So in the future, they are going to be able to use it. I like this cycle because the most important part here is that you're going to help them reflect. They reflect when they are giving peer assessment to their classmates. Now, from this experience, what is the first reflection that I can come up with? The first one is that vocabulary is essential to communicate, as I said at the beginning, but we cannot do it just by, memorizing words. We have to be able to share ideas with these words, and context, again, is essential. Another conclusion, another reflection that I can share with you is that storytelling, even if it's something like real as an anecdote, something funny, or something that the students are going to come up with, provide a context, gives a reason, gives a meaning, establish certain parameters in which students can move around. And that makes the story more involving, more encouraging, and more profound at the moment of keeping the learning from themselves for future use. When students work with peer assessment or peer correction, then you are motivating them to be more responsible for their own learning, but also the learning of their classmates. And they are more active participants. They monitor themselves while they monitor their classmates. This applies to writing, but also applies a lot to speaking. They feel that they can contribute. And remember, as teachers, personally, I learned more about English when I started teaching it. So students can identify with this attitude of, I am responsible for helping my classmate is responsible for helping me. A final conclusion that I would like to share with you is that when we combine storytelling and peer correction, the learning of the students is deeper because it is personal. The activities are student-centered, and students can see that they are really using the language for something they are familiar with because, in their own languages, they tell stories. So it's practical for them. I would like to ask you also to reflect on the presentation that we have just had. What did you learn in this presentation? Is there anything you liked about it? What was it? Why? Maybe the opposite. Is there something that you did not like? Why? How did you feel during this presentation? What would you like to do with this learning in the future? Do you think you can use these in your own classes? And now I would like you to go back to the piece of paper that I asked you to get at the beginning and give a look at it. The questions that you had at the beginning, were they answered? Do this activity with your students in your classes. Tell them we're going to talk about this topic, or we're going to talk about this vocabulary or this grammar issue or this content, and prepare questions. And if after your class they have answered your questions, you have satisfied their expectations, most likely. These are my references. And I really hope I have satisfied your own expectations. If you would like to know more about storytelling and peer assessment, or just sharing your experiences with me, this is my contact information. And one more time, thank you so much to Foro de Estudios Lenguas Internacional. Thank you to all of you for being part of my presentation, and hopefully we'll be together soon. Take care, be well, bye-bye.